Hi, Roland.
Hi, hello, how are you?
Very good, very good. How are you?
Excellent. No, I'm great, thanks, and really looking forward to today, actually. Seems like
Yes,
a fantastic event.
yes. Thanks so much, Roland, and thanks a lot for taking the time. What time is it over there? You right now?
It's relatively sociable. It's 8:45 in the morning, so
Good, good. I
not
hope you
too
had
bad.
your coffee and you are fresh.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Good, good, perfect. So we are very excited to have you with us today. Roland is leading the EMEA sales for freelancer.com. And we will talk about the changing landscape of the freelancer market and what does on-demand workforce offer to companies. So yeah, Roland. So before we get in, we talked with Roland regarding when we say on-demand talent, what are we talking about? So maybe if you allow me for a minute or two, I can just go over what it means in terms of human cloud and gig economy. So today, when we get into the world of freelancing and on-demand talent, and we are talking about everybody now speaks about gig economy. So when we say gig economy, it's actually a pretty big, like wide. It includes quite a wide range of different talent. So it includes all the people that bring your groceries to a UX designer, to a programmer or freelancer, a consultant or sector experts. And it's all it's also a part of the sharing economy where we have on-demand non-labor assets like Airbnb or Uber cars, not the drivers but the cars. So when we talk about gig economy and freelancing and on-demand workforce, today we will mostly talk about human cloud, which is the talent segment in the that are working in the platforms. Is that right, Roland?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good visual you've got to define it. Because
Yeah.
it's what's really also important is, especially with this being such a global movement, there's so many countries and organizations around the world that all have their different terminology. So it's really good to try and home in that we're all talking about the same thing. And I
Yes.
think what's also really important to note is that when we're talking about temporary agency work, other temporary workers, independent contractors, and statement of work, this is nothing new. People have been doing this for years really successfully, and it's been a key part of businesses. The new aspect is more around this human cloud. And that's really where technology's kind of enabled us to hire freelancers instantly at the click of a button. It's kind of removed all these geographical boundaries that were previously in place when hiring other sorts of talent, and really given organizations the opportunity just to look at talent on a global basis rather than who's commutable to the office.
Yes, absolutely. And as we both know, like after the pandemic, it has the landscape has begun to change tremendously. So how has it been before the pandemic, now, and hopefully when the pandemic is over as well? Like, how do the corporations respond? How the freelancers respond? Because freelancer.com is one of the largest freelancing platforms in the world. So how do you see the changes that are taking place in terms of the supply side, so in terms of freelancers, and also demand side? Like, how has the corporates begin, and or all types of enterprises began to respond to these recent changes?
And I think it will be clear to everybody watching today that obviously the pandemic's had a huge shift in the way that we work, and especially around freelancer supply and demand, but also in so many ways as well. So I think that initial shift will be no news to anyone. What I find really interesting is that we've had the pandemic that has driven this significant change. But what's really interesting is how this change has stuck around after that initial driving force of lockdowns, etc. And you only have to look at some of the data that we've got specifically relating to Turkey, which illustrates this quite well. And looking at things,
that will be very interesting.
And looking at things from a kind of projects posted side, so what we call the demand side. So if we look at Turkey as a geography for us, in the 3 years prior to the pandemic, it was relatively flat. It wasn't an area that was particularly growing like some of the other geographical regions we've had. But as soon as 2020 came along, we had a 66% increase in the amount of projects being posted on our platform. And if you imagine, for a lot of 2020, businesses were in full lockdown and not doing anything. So, that was a huge change. And then what's really interesting is we kind of maintained that level throughout 2021 when things have started to settle down. And it feels like there's
63%. It's for Turkey, or is it
just for Turkey? Just for Turkey alone. So 66% increase in 2020 on the number of projects that were posted on our platform by buyers in Turkey. And then we had a similar surge on the supply side as well. So in 2020, we had 165,000 new freelancers sign up from Turkey alone.
165,000.
165,000.
You are kidding me! Oh my god!
No, that's how many people created an account to become a freelancer. I'm not saying every one of those got work, but that's the amount of people that had that interest and that drive. And as you, sorry, go on.
So that was a very big shift compared to the figures before the pandemic, right?
Definitely. And I mean, in 2021, it tailed off a little bit with the amount of people signing up to be freelancers, but it was still 87% up on pre-pandemic levels. So there's this shift and movement that's happening. And I was at an event talking about this the other day, that there's so many human factors which I really don't want to take away from everybody that have helped drive this shift. And especially around COVID as well. But there's no doubt that without the huge developments that we've had in technology prior to the pandemic, this whole flexible working aspect would have been a very different story. I mean, could you imagine if the pandemic came 15 years earlier from an economic point of view, what the impact would have been if we had no global high-speed internet, there wasn't widespread cloud computing, we didn't have the video conferencing calls that we spend our lives on these days. There was no, widespread chat tools, talent marketplaces, even, all the fintech that's developed to keep the money moving around. It would have been a completely different story. But it was all that hard work that's been done over the last 5-10 years, which got us in a position where suddenly, when this flicked the switch and everybody had to work this way, there was technology that could cope with it to enable it.
Yeah. So do you think now corporations are aware that there is such technology and they can utilize freelancers?
It's getting there. I mean, it's with a platform like ours, we actually started off, our heritage was more in the kind of really small startup space. Companies who are very small, who just needed a logo done, and the big enterprises kind of had stayed away from it. But we had started a real focus on enterprise about 3 or 4 years ago. And there's been, dramatic shift in their appetite and how they're using these platforms as well. And I think is it worth me talking about perhaps a couple of kind of very high level use cases of why these enterprises use these platforms?
Yeah, that would be really nice.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots, but perhaps there's a lot of it is big corporations have kind of woken up to how these platforms can really help them be a lot more agile and react to work demands much faster. And I think a classic example of this is in the outsourcing industry, whether it's IT services or BPO services, anything that's where a business is largely led on client demand, and an organization wins a big contract and suddenly they need a quick shift and a scale up in people. And platforms like ours have enabled people to hire, vast, large teams of freelancers within, a couple of weeks' notice, all around the world in a quick way, in a way that you just couldn't physically dream of doing on a permanent basis with the internal processes you have. And we've had organizations scale up, teams of 300-400 people within a couple of weeks. So I think that's one of the big things.
3 or 4 times I couldn't get that. 3 or 4 times bigger, you said?
So I said scaling up teams of 300 to 400 freelancers.
Wow.
within a couple of weeks.
Wow. And it's is it mostly like crowdsourcing type of work, or is it like hands-on?
It's a mix. A lot of that is IT services. So developers, whether that's in, Java, Python, typical development work. Some of it's in the BPO space. So it might be translation or transliteration or basic task work as well. Some of it might be more focused on kind of digital design type work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that's like before the pandemic, like, would you see such scale, like a few hundred freelancers being requested by corporations, or is it something new that came up after the pandemic?
I don't think it's a direct. It's not a direct result of the pandemic, but the pandemic has helped speed up the change that was happening. There was already this appetite and this change happening before the pandemic, so it hasn't created something that wasn't there, but it's just sped up the natural speed of which we're people adopting. And now people are so much more comfortable with remote work and not meeting someone that they hire and someone not being in the office, that it's made that transition a bit easier.
So yeah, absolutely. And in terms of cases, they are trying to, like we just had Bade from one of the largest banks, head of HR, and she was telling about the talent gap. And so they are mostly utilizing it for the talent gap, you think, or to scale up, like, and down, for the flexibility, for the talent gap. What's your view?
So one of them is that ability to scale up, but another key part is the talent gap as well. And suddenly when we have this global skill shortage and the great resignation and everyone's fighting over talent, there's if you keep looking in the same talent pool over and over again, it's not going to suddenly create different results. You need to have a different focus and find some other talent pools. So what freelancing platforms like this does, it opens up other geographies, so there's suddenly much more skills, but it also opens up different demographics of people. Suddenly, maybe there was a mother or a father who used to be a developer and then they had children, and then they decided they didn't want to be commuting 2 hours to the office each day. They didn't want to not see their children, but they want a more flexible way of working. So maybe freelancing is a great way to enable them, and they can do lots of different work. So it's really good for diversity and just opening up to different types of people, as long as you're able to work in a different way. So that's definitely one of the key drivers.
Yeah. And we talked about a bit about the freelancers, but in terms of demand, like, and corporate enterprise demand mostly, like, which parts of the world are you see more active for?
So there's also there's a supply and a demand element to that as well. So especially in our platform, we've seen a global increase across the board in people wanting to freelance, but we still have a strong concentration in some of the lower cost countries and some of the buyers in the higher cost countries, because that's where they can get some really significant cost savings by opening up. Talent. And what we find, where they just can't find anyone in, and they need to be able to open up to other countries around the world. But countries really leading the way. US is doing lots of work. India is doing some really interesting stuff at scale as well. Lots of countries around Europe as well. The UK's already had a very strong contractor freelancer market for quite some time. But a lot of the other countries, like the data that we've seen with Turkey, there's these other countries just starting to creep in out of nowhere and really gain some good momentum. And I think that's where the real interesting opportunity is.
Yes, absolutely. And for the talent you mentioned from Turkey, is it mostly IT or digital talent, or how is the? Yeah.
So the top 5 skills that we have specifically relating to Turkey is number 1, which surprised me actually in Turkey, is translation services. I imagine because lots of people have a very good command of English, and they're able to do translation work. Digital design was next, so that's covering kind of graphic design, logo design, Photoshop. Number 3 was bunched together a number of key development languages. So PHP, Java, Python, JavaScript, and SQL were all kind of bunched around the next level. And then after that, it was data entry. And then number 5 was content writing. So a couple of real kind of core modern digital skill sets, and a couple more traditional things like translation and data entry.
Interesting. And for the, again, coming back on the demand side, like the companies, when they are getting all the freelancers from around the world, like how do the regulations and policies help? Like, or, you know, not help, but the opposite, like how does it look at the moment for the companies to adapt these talent platforms and utilize international talent?
So there's lots of regulations around the world that impact this area, and it's really important to work with a partner who has a broad understanding of what kind of things you need to look out for in setting up programs in the right way. There's a lot of local legislation, but some stuff does get lost at the moment in between country borders. You know, whether there will be more regulation that's more global in the future, I don't know. But it's a very hard ask to get lots of countries to combine together to have shared regulations. But even though each individual countries have different regulations, most of them all have the same themes. And when we're setting up a new program of work, what we're trying to do is making sure that we're setting up a genuine freelancer program, where these are freelancers doing task-based, short-term, gig-style work, and not sat there as a disguised employee and getting around things. Because the regulations are there, you know, to protect employers, to protect the freelancers, and also to protect governments to make sure they're getting the right amount of tax for the right amount of work. So whenever we set a program up, whatever country it is, we can talk through those details, you know, and make sure that we've got we've got something set up for success.
Yeah. And so I also know like there are some you know, macro level initiatives that freelancer.com does, like government funds and maybe other initiatives as well. Like, can you shed a bit of light on what do you guys do on a macro scale, or what can be done, what you think can be done on a macro scale?
Well, I think the point that you mentioned about government there is really interesting. And there's a few governments we're working with around the world at the moment, which have got some really big ideas to change the whole landscapes of their country by enabling freelancing. And I could pick a few, but one of the active ones that we're involved in at the moment is really interesting. So Saudi Arabia, as a country, have previously been very reliant on oil production. They can see the world is changing and they're going to have to shift their economy. So they're putting a huge amount of investment to change them into more of a digital focused economy. But that's going to involve, you know, a lot of reskilling of a whole nation of people, getting them into work for various different things. So that they're investing a lot in training, and they see freelancing as a real big way to give people access to work after the training, and to be able to connect with companies all around the world. With Saudi Arabia, to almost to be an exporter of digital skills, so that, you know, we can create this pool on freelancer.com of Saudi Arabia trained freelancers, which will be kind of, you know, a prestige pool of really high quality freelancers. So in order to make that movement happen, you know, after the training and after some people have had some work experience, they've come to us and said, look, we really want these freelancers who already, you know, got some experience and some training to be able to start engaging with international buyers around the world. Can you make this happen? So we were like, sure, but, you know, what we need is, you know, a significant fund of investment that we can then distribute to companies all around the world and say, I know you were going to hire someone from our main platform. Would you like to hire someone from this pool? And we're paid for it. and we can give companies up to $3,000 grant per freelancer that they hire, providing the work is mainly in digital design, but also some web development as well. And that's having one of our values at freelancers.com is about changing lives, and that's something that's amazing to work on, because we're literally changing the lives of thousands of people in various different countries, and kind of just giving them economic opportunity that they wouldn't have had before. So if anyone watching this as well has any projects that they would like to get done via that pool, you can drop a note to sales@freelancer.com and just quote the Future of Work Summit. And we're quite happy to talk to you about how we could distribute some funding up to $3,000 to do a project from that pool. So
perfect. So changing the world one freelancer at a time.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
Very good. Roland, super exciting. So much more to talk about, but we are running short in time. I'm just curious, probably you don't have it right in front of you, but how are the ratings of freelancers from Turkey vis-a-vis the other parts? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, I didn't pull that data actually, but that would have been really interesting stuff to look at actually. If I'm invited back next year, I'll tell you.
Okay, all right. Yes, hopefully maybe we'll do it in Istanbul. So yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks a lot, Roland.
Excellent, pleasure. Thank you.
Exciting. Looking forward to be in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye now.